Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, as a leader, how do you use your texting to network? Have you really ever even thought about how you can strategically go about using texting to network? Do you just use it to communicate information? Well, today's episode, we're going to dive into this topic, and I think it's going to be pretty important for our listeners because there are some ways we can use texting to accelerate our relationships by texting with purpose instead of just purely texting memes or emojis, which are important and they have their place. We can actually use it to network and build that relationship. Well, so for today's episode, we are joined by a friend of mine, a leader, someone that I highly admire, especially as I'm watching him build and connect and network online. It's been exciting to get to know him from that perspective. I'm thrilled to welcome Caleb Paull. He's a community builder, networker, director of membership at a Orlando social club. He's a speaker. He's our guest today, and I'm so excited to have this conversation. Caleb, welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's a true honor to be here and be with you here on the first week back at it from the
That's
New
right.
Year's and Christmas break. So what an honor.
That's just incredible. And I'm so excited you're joining us. We're doing a series on texting with people. And just as I've watched, and I've kind of watched from afar your leadership online and how you network and communicate, I was just honored to have you and to be a part. For our listeners, would you just kind of dive into a little bit of your story, share who you are, what you do, what's got you to this place, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I will just keep it brief and simple, but honest at the same time. I come from a small town in Massachusetts, right outside of Worcester. For those of you who are familiar with Worcester, or as the locals would pronounce it, Worcester, with the Boston accent. So I grew up there 18 years and ended up leaving home when I was 18 to move out to Colorado. Spent some time there, really enjoyed Colorado. And then the next few years were spent traveling to different states, different places. I was at a place in my life where I didn't really know who I was, what I wanted, and what life was really all about for me. And so in those early ages of my life and teen and transitioning into adulthood, I lived in 4 different states and many different houses and towns along the way until I ultimately ended up landing in Orlando almost exactly 5 years ago, January 12th, 2020, right before COVID happened. And I came here to follow a longtime friend and mentor of mine from back in Massachusetts. He was a mentor in high school and mentored me and walked with me through many, many seasons of life, including the career transition from the food and beverage industry into more of a sales business development role in Pennsylvania at the time. And he then interviewed me and brought me down to Orlando. Well, he interviewed me in the end of 2019 and brought me down in 2020, where I started working with him and for him. And of course, 2 months later, COVID happens, totally disrupts the way in which we communicate, the way we connect, the way that we interact with people around us. And so that was a little bit of a challenging year to build new community in a brand new city, in a new industry. I knew one person, which was an incredible blessing. But other than that, I didn't really know much about Orlando. I moved here kind of on a step of faith. And 2021, I joined the Citrus Club, which is the place where I now work full time. I joined the club as a place to build new relationships and meet people and try to get more involved in business life in Orlando and what that looked like. And so, kind of speeding up, I ended up meeting a gentleman on the board of directors at the Citrus Club. He offered me a bigger, better role. And then over time, I continued to getting more involved in the Citrus Club. I served on committees. I helped with events. I did a lot of different things to where they actually approached me about a role to fill as director of membership sales, which is the role that I now have full time. And this role permits me to build deep and meaningful relationships with business owners, community leaders, political leaders, all over Orlando, which is extremely special. And then on the other side of that, I spend a lot of time speaking and doing different coaching engagements for companies through my organization called the VIP Co, which is basically a coaching and connections platform. So I'm all about helping companies to really drive and build a culture of connection. And I do that through, networking events and experiences, as well as coaching and training and equipping people on human connection, social intelligence, and strategic networking.
Oof, that's so good. Do you think in 2025, my goodness, I cannot believe it's 2025, that the need for networking, the need for especially business professionals to get shoulder to shoulder, be around, do you think it's going to keep increasing? Do you see a decrease in it? Kind of give us the state of where you think that's at.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in some of our conversation even today, I'm sure, but more than ever before, people are craving connection, like human life on life connection, and not just because of the emotion part of it. It's because of the energy part of it as well, right? The human touch and the element of energy. People are craving that in person interaction that's built on a foundation of trust and honor and consideration. And I think that's going to become more challenging as technology continues to advance and change, and how we adapt as humans
Mm.
to technology and how we kind of blend with that. But the point is this: it's going to become more and more and more important to have and develop the skills, which is why I am building the platform that I'm building, and the trainings and the modules and topics that I'm covering, is to really train and equip people on how to effectively and authentically show up in the marketplace with the tools that they need and the skills they need to develop real relationships. You may have heard the book Harvey Mackay, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. You
Mm.
know, that's going to become more important than ever before in 5, 7, 10 years, when if crap hits the fan or if things get challenging as a society, you're going to start really valuing those people in your circle that have high influence, who have high level circles, who know and have close relationships with doctors and lawyers and people in the tech world. It's going to become a lot more important. And I think people are seeing that and feeling that. And the challenge with it is just the social anxiety part of it is really a big challenge because of how technology has created so much disconnect, social disconnect, and emotional disconnect.
I
So,
love that. And that's a good segue to, leaders. How can we, use texting to strengthen that, that connect, because so often, we all text differently, and so, what are some ways you think a leader, as we get a little bit more strategic, we get a little more focused on it, we can use texting in kind of that meaningful way?
yeah, I think it really starts at the very beginning with the fact that you have to do it. You have to text people. And that might sound silly, but if you stop and think about it, and this might be hard for some people to hear and to digest, but on the receiving end of texting, you as a leader, especially if you're a high influence leader, you are not above texting people back. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is, so often people of high caliber almost have this mentality that they're above texting people back because they're busy, they're important, their time is valuable. And I get that you're busy, but I'm busy as well, right? There's no, it's just an interesting thing when it comes to the hierarchy of business owners and leaders, but there is that mindset, and I don't believe it's a positive one, that, oh, I don't owe you a text back. And technically you don't. But if you're asking me the question of, as a leader, how
Mm,
can I use texting? Well, you have to do it first and foremost, because there's a lot of people who don't do it because they think that they don't owe you a text. They don't
right.
owe you a response. And while you're right, I just don't think that that's the right mentality to have as a leader, right? Like, and everything else that we're going to talk about today and everything else that I'm going to share really does stem out of a belief, my belief, that I have the power within my own pockets, within my own hands with this device that we call a cell phone to change the course of my life, my business, and certainly my relationships, right? It's like with this device, you have the ability to build walls of separation and division between you and those around you. Or with it, you can fortify relationships. You can create open lines of communication. You can create meaningful, lasting moments with those within your circles or those that are not in your circle that you wish you knew better,
Yep.
right? Like this device is capable of so much. It's available to distract yourself or to educate yourself, right? To gossip or to edify with your words, to waste time or to save and enhance time. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing when you step back and you say, as a leader, how am I going to use this device? Particularly when it comes to texting, you start to realize words matter a whole lot. Little
Mm,
things matter. Words are powerful, and the smallest of things can make the biggest difference. You know that you've heard that phrase, it takes one tree to make 1,000 matchsticks, but it just takes one single matchstick to burn 1,000
yep.
trees. And I kind of relate that to a text. Like
Wow.
a text is just a tiny little matchstick, but it has so much power and so much influence. And when you
Wow.
can really grasp that as a leader, your whole mindset just begins to shift.
Wow. Wow. Way to kick us off with a bang. Because that's true. I mean, that is so many of us just take it for granted that we have all of this power right in our fingertips. And it is amazing. A single text can disrupt your day. It can, send you to the moon. So walk us through, I just meet you at an event and I give you my business card. Is there like a certain amount of time, I do, should there be like a segue before that first text? Is it fair game? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. For me, when it comes to texting, I've built a very basic framework, something that's easy for me to follow, and I would imagine would be very helpful for some of the listeners here. It's a very basic framework that now have become habits for me, and I believe could easily become habits for you. Number one, if you think of someone, text them. Number
Mm,
two, when you don't see someone around, text them. And three, which goes more in line with your question, is after you meet with someone, text them. And I'm big on when it comes to networking, the most intentional guy or girl in the room wins.
oof.
Period. End of story. Period. End of story. The most intentional guy in the room or girl in the room wins. And it might sound cliche to say, "Oh, be intentional with your texting or be intentional with your networking." But I like to reframe it and say intentionality is perhaps the most powerful advice that I could possibly give you, right? Because at a higher rate than ever before, we're living in a distracted, depressed, lonely, and anxious society. And nobody would argue that. We know that that's true,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
People are craving attention. People are craving affirmation. They're craving positive encouragement. They're craving connection. And so you start to realize, wow, words matter. Words are powerful. Words hold an incredible weight. So use them wisely and with great intention.
Mm,
So when I think of the question of how quickly should I text somebody back, it's not so much about how quickly I should text them back. It's just when you're thinking about it through that lens,
yep.
it's going to prompt you to want to text them, right? So this afternoon I met with someone over lunch, right? And after I left, I texted them and I said, I used their name and I said, it was so great to spend some time with you today over lunch. I look forward to finding ways to work more closely in 2025. Right. Same if I was at a networking event. Now, if I was at a big event and I kind of loosely interacted with 30 people, I might not send a personal
Yeah.
well thought out text to 30 people. But the few individuals that really stood out in my mind as someone I'd like to connect further with, continue the conversation with, bet your bottom dollar that person will receive a text from me that night before I pull out of the parking garage, because I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make it a priority, and I'm going to let them know how much I appreciated their time, or how much I appreciated the introduction if somebody introduced us,
Yep.
or whatever it
I love
was.
that.
I'm going to put something in words of, hey, it was great to meet you tonight at this event or at this venue or whatever it was, and to talk about this or to learn about this, right? Your business, your family, whatever it was. Something that let them know, hey, I was listening. I hear you. I see you. I appreciate you. And let them know I have every intention of following back up and following through with everything that we talked about. That alone sets you apart. I don't think people realize how much they can set themselves apart just by doing that,
Yep.
because so few people do it.
Yep.
And I would know. I meet hundreds of people on a regular basis networking, and I
Yep.
that barely ever happens to me when somebody immediately texts me back and lets them know how much they appreciated my conversation, my input, whatever it was, right? It's just really, really powerful.
Wow. Wow. Boy, I love that. Talk to us about the balance of like fun and seriousness, in text messages. I mean, I guess there's two angles, just networking with someone and then we've known them for a while. That's probably a whole different category. But, what do you think, is that balance between fun and serious and trying not to, you know, go overboard too much with it, but
Yeah, I think it depends on just who the person is. On, like, for me, right? If I'm going to text somebody, I use a lot of emojis. Classic example, and I know you've even talked about that in some of your posts, which I've loved to see the different dialogue and different perspectives on it. Like, I'm a person who communicates with emojis, and I'm okay. I've embraced that. I'm okay with that. However, if I'm talking with somebody and they never use an emoji, I'm not going to flood my messages with emojis. I'm going to mirror their energy, and I'm
mm,
going to mirror, maybe not even energy, but I'm going to mirror their vocabulary. I'm going to mirror their, exclamation marks. If they put three exclamation marks, I'm going to put three exclamation marks. If they put a period, I'm going to put a period. If they have like a run on sentence and they respond that way, I'm going to respond back because it's familiar to them, and it's going to
mm,
provide an opportunity for them to feel like I'm like them and they're like me, which is common ground, which is relatability. And I do believe you can build that through texting.
wow. Wow, that's good. I love that. I have recently like been exploring the world of emojis more, and yeah, it's been exciting.
I think it's fun. It's a way to express yourself. Obviously, you can get carried away with it, right? You can go down a whole unhealthy path with that. But the point is, you can use it in a healthy and fun way. I just think it's important to be aware who your audience is, be aware of who you're talking about and with what you're talking about, and recognize when it is or is not appropriate, if that makes sense.
I love that. So, how do you go about go about it strategically? Making sure some people are top of mind. Not missing text messages. And then not, making sure your device is attached to your hand 24/7. I mean, there's got to be a balance to it. What are some of the ways you balance that and make sure you kind of keep that connection alive?
Yeah, so it comes back to what I was mentioning a minute ago about an event or meeting with somebody. If I text them immediately, then I know I put the ball back in their court. I did
Yep.
my role. I reached out intentionally, and it was a personal message. It wasn't some sort of copy and paste. It wasn't an automated message through AI. It was from me to them, and it was done immediately, which I
Yep.
think has the fast eat the slow. We all know the importance of speed in the marketplace, especially when we're talking business and transactionally speaking. Speed is extremely important. But on the back end of that, on the more practical side, if I know I need to text somebody back, or if I owe somebody information that can easily be sent over text and I'm not in a position to do it immediately, then I will make a note for myself in my I have a very organized system for how I keep track of notes, and I have a column specifically called CTS, which is Commitment Tracking System. And
Huh.
if I committed to somebody that I'm going to text them information, or I'm going to text them an introduction to somebody, or whatever it might be, I'm going to put a little
Wow.
reminder in that note that I owe this person a text about whatever it was. Maybe I owe them an article. Maybe I owe them an introduction. Maybe I owe them an invite to an upcoming event, right? Different things that it could be. But if I'm not in a position to do it right then and there, which is the ideal, then I'm going to do it later. But I have to
Wow.
track it somehow.
Yeah.
That's just what works well for me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. For years, kind of a different, in the same category, but I've always put a high uh, amount of time and energy on handwritten cards. So I'll spend a lot of time sending a handwritten card. And I've had a spreadsheet. How do I do that? You said something earlier that really grabbed my attention when you talked about, leaders. You're not gonna experience this as much as you do it to other people. Why do you think that is? Why do you think leaders, you know, sometimes it seems like, especially with this, and I would even say with, I send 10 times more cards than I actually get. Now I know getting a handwritten card is a little different. Maybe it's a little bit more archaic, those kind of things. But why is it that some leaders kind of go a couple extra steps and some don't? What do you think about that?
I think that it comes down to, like, the people that are doing it and going out of their way to be a little more intentional, and taking that extra step or two. Like, that those are people who have decided, and I would encourage everybody listening to make the conscious decision of whether or not this is actually important to you.
Ooh,
Like,
that's good.
it, do you recognize the benefit that this could actually have in your life and in the relationships around you? Do you really believe it? Because if you do, it will begin to influence the way in which you reach out and the way in which you respond to people over text. It just
Yep.
will. Like, if you
Yep.
believe everything that I was saying earlier about the power that you have within your own hands, and
Yep.
so on and so forth, it just will change the way that you react and respond to people over text. It'll change the way that you reach out, because you're just convicted of it. You believe that this matters to you. And some people it matters to them, and some people it doesn't. And I'm of the mindset that perhaps those that are not quite as intentional, or just choose not to respond back to people at all, and totally ghost people, is because they maybe have not slowed down long enough to think through the real you know
Yeah.
outcomes of those moves. Like, I tell people, listen, like, ghosting, for example, it kills not only your credibility, but it kills your likability, and it kills your referability. Like, they talk about that in business, is like, are you a
Wow.
referable business person? Are you a referable entrepreneur?
Yep.
Well, texting is just one small little way that you can make yourself more credible, more likable, and more referable through your
Yep.
ability to text, and to text well. It's absolutely incredible to me how
Wow.
how much you can set yourself apart just through your texting efforts, and committing to do it well, commit to doing it excellently in the way that you communicate, that it's clear, that it's honest, that it's transparent, that it's, I mean, consider the list goes on and on.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely. Wow. What do you how do you judge the line when it goes from that kind of networking connection to, okay, now we're friends? And, once you're kind of through that line, how does your texting change a bit? Does it kind of stay the same, or does it kind of go into a different mode at that point?
Yeah, I think my default, and people who know me and hear me say this will be like, "Oh, that's true. Caleb does do that." I kind of treat my default response and texting style is more of like that. I'm just friends and brotherly with everybody. Like, I use those words a lot. Like, "What's going on, brother?" Like, "Great to see you." I use that lingo in my
Yeah.
texting a lot.
Yeah.
But again, there are times, especially if it's maybe a higher level individual, or whatever the case may be, if it's somebody that I don't sense would appreciate or receive that well, then I'm going to refer to them maybe by their last name or maybe by their first name. And hopefully, I've done enough on my end through the questions that I'm asking them in my conversations and getting to know them that I'll have a pretty good understanding of kind of how they operate and how they communicate, right? Based on their personality style. Maybe they're more laid back. Maybe they are more like fun and bubbly and comedic in nature. And there are others who are not. So, part of it is just being aware of who you're talking to again. But I think my default is to be more I'm just super genuine. I treat everybody like they're my friend over text until proven otherwise. But it's it's funny. There was something that I was thinking about leading up to this conversation, and it might have been one of your questions about how do you know when your texting becomes like too much or when it becomes an
Mm,
annoyance or whatnot. Like, how do you know the balance between not texting enough to where they're not even thinking of you, but not texting so much to where it's like, that's actually obnoxious. Please stop
right.
messaging me.
Right.
And I think the most simple but honest answer that I could give there is just ask.
Mm,
There's no shame in
wow.
asking somebody, "Hey, is it okay that I reached out to you again? And is it okay if I kind of stay on you about this? If it's following up on a lead or depending on the context, just ask. Like, this is your opportunity to exercise transparency and honesty through texting with your relationships, and I see that as a really positive thing. Just asking someone, hey, like, I want to make sure I'm not being a bother. Is it okay that I'm reaching out again? Uh, and if they say
Yeah.
yes, they say yes. Great. I'm okay to continue reaching out. Continue to be intentional in the way that you reach out. You don't want it to just feel spammy and like you're just overloading them with meaningless content or information. But I think people appreciate the personal touch. They appreciate being thought of. They appreciate, when you reach out, hey, I thought of you today, or this reminded me of you, or hey, I saw, your company's billboard on the city today and it reminded me of you. I don't care what it is, but people like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just that next level of, surprising them with something. Or I even found I love Facebook. It tells me the birthdays. I love wishing people
Hmm.
happy birthday. But the
Yeah.
people that I know, I have found that if I do a simple video, happy birthday, it's a great day, here's what I love about you. I mean, I'm shocked at the texts that come back to me about how meaningful that is. Even little things like that. I mean, can just cement that connection, can deepen that trust, which is just incredible. Now, I think the most important question is, are you an iPhone user or an Android user? I mean, this is the important part, right?
Oh no, is my screen about to black out? I've used both. I've used both over the years, but I currently use iPhone.
Yeah. So I mean, it's tough, right? The iPhone, you're trying to text a video to the Android. There's all this mess. I mean, I
It's
kid,
tough.
but one of my kids has an Android, and it's just we joke he's the black sheep of the family. I'm like, why did you go that? Why did you go that far, man?
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Okay, you talked about ghosting. Let's acknowledge, are there a couple other bad habits or things that get in the way of maybe that texting coming across not as connecting? Anything else you see that could be put on our radars?
Yeah. When it comes to texting, I think one of the biggest mistakes or just bad habits that people have formed, myself included, I think everybody has done this at one point or another, is using texting as a primary source of communication instead
Ooh.
of instead of a tool, texting being to complement and enhance your communication, not as the primary source of it,
Wow.
right? Like, a common mistake that I've seen when it comes to texting is attempting to communicate something or to relay information or to resolve something over text that could have actually been more easily and effectively been accomplished through a simple call or even an
Yep.
in-person conversation when had the chance. But the point is like, the basic rule of thumb for this when it comes to texting is anything to do with conflict confrontation or serious apologies should never be done over text.
Yes.
It just shouldn't, because first of all, that's going to be out there forever. Your words and what you put on there, like, it could potentially be out in the electronic universe forever. And when you start to realize and believe in the power of words and the impact that words have, you start to be very careful of what you put out there
Yep.
for that person to see, for all their friends to see. If they choose to show it to people, they could post about it. And I'm not saying you want to live in fear, but I do encourage people to take that as opportunities to live with greater levels of intention
Yep.
through texting. So I say, hey, basic rule of thumb: anything to do with conflict, anything to do with confrontations or serious apologies, it just can't happen over a
That's
text
good.
message, right?
That's good.
I think another bad habit for texting is just word vomiting, or
Yeah.
just sharing too much and being too transparent over text, again, because
Yes.
it takes away from the importance of an in-person relationship, where trust is truly developed and nurtured is in person, face to face. So again, you just start to realize certain boundaries, and I think you do have to set certain boundaries and parameters like that, right?
Yep.
Like, create some rules and boundaries by which you live by. Technological standards, whatever you want to call them, you
Yeah.
have to put them in place, or else it's just gonna, you know, create ruin in your life.
Oh, I love that. That's powerful. Okay, so for someone who, as we kind of come full circle and wrap up the conversation, someone who's like, okay, I have not been leaning into this, and you've given us some great gold throughout. Is there any, first steps you could give us as kind of, a wrap up here? Some things is just remember, think about, so we can go and do these.
Yeah, I think it starts with a simple choice, because, again, everybody has their phone with them throughout the day and uses their phone, and most people text frequently. So this is not a question of like, oh, am I going to text people? No, it's just a matter of that when you do it, that you will do it well. Like,
Yeah.
make that commitment to yourself. We're in a new year, right? New year, new perspective, new opportunity. Every day is a new opportunity, but I know a lot of people are in that mindset right now with it
Yeah.
being a new year,
Yeah.
that it's like, just commit to yourself and commit to those around you to communicate honestly, clearly, sincerely. I'll add the word graciously
Yep.
and thoroughly over text. And if you truly believe in the importance, which many business owners and entrepreneurs do, if you believe in the importance of developing excellence in all aspects of life or in business, well, that ought to translate and extend over to your texting efforts as well. It really should. And again, it will positively change, or negatively, depending on how you use it. It will positively change your relationships. It'll change the way that people think and feel toward you through your ability to text and to respond and to reach out and acknowledge and affirm, right? So, like, I told somebody in a speech that I did on this topic a while back, I said, if you truly believe that you feel seen, or that a text has the ability to make you feel seen and heard and valued or appreciated, and you believe that, and all of those things could be done in less time than it takes to eat your lunch, less time than it takes to pump your gas, less time than it takes to prepare your lunch, less time. I mean, there's so many things that we do on a daily basis that take longer than it takes to send a simple, well thought, well intentioned text. The As far as I'm concerned, the only reason that we choose not to do it is because we don't believe it's important, or
Yep.
we simply don't want to.
Yep.
But has that incredible impactful power. So it starts with a choice of, hey, this is a part of my life. From now on, I'm going to make a commitment to myself and to everybody that I interact with, that my texting efforts will be used for good, and that I commit to excellence in this particular area of my life. And I think that that's the first step. I know that's still kind of a little vague, but I think it has to start there.
I love it. I love it. That's powerful. I mean, you have given us just absolute gold. And what I love about it is you model this, and the connection just oozes from you. So I appreciate that. Before I let you go, I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. We're building this online resource library for leaders if they want to find some new resources to be inspired by. And so we ask each of our guests these questions. Is there a speaker that you love? Every time you've heard them, you can't wait to see them again? Is there someone you just highly recommend?
Good question. I am a huge fan on more of a business side of things. I'm a huge fan of Will Guidara, the author of
Mm.
Unreasonable Hospitality. He's a tremendous speaker. His storytelling is bar none, fantastic speaker. Looking forward to hearing him again. On more of a faith-based note, I'm a big fan of John Mark Comer.
Mm.
He is most well known for his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is all about the world we live in of busyness and hurry, and how it's so toxic for our human minds and our relationships. And I just love his approach to different topics about faith and our life and our relationships. And so that's definitely one of my favorite speakers as
Oh, I
well.
love it. If you're a podcast listener, not everybody is, but if you are, is there a development or a guilty pleasure podcast that you just highly recommend?
Podcasts, top three podcasts right now would be the PBD podcast, or
Oh, yeah.
anything really from the Valuetainment guys. And then number two, I would say Mel Robbins has some really, really good content out there. I've been listening to her over the past week. Some of her end of the year episodes were really good. And then Patrick Lencioni, I believe
Oh,
his
yeah.
podcast is called At the Table. Again, just love his approach. Some of the topics he dives into are just out of the ordinary. He's the guy who's not afraid to talk about conflict in the workplace and how to work through it, and just really relevant but helpful in the way that he and his team, his podcast hosts, approach it. And he's always enjoyable to listen to. So those are three that stand out in my mind.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And then lastly, is there a book? Every you're like, hey, this book has impacted me so much. Every leader's got to read this book.
Every leader, in my opinion, should definitely read How to Win Friends and Influence People. I know it's talked about all over the world and has been for many years, but you just, I'm young, right? But the more that I've lived my life, I've realized how impactful the truths, yet simple, but impactful the truths are in that book, because it just breaks down the core human need and core desires that we have as human beings. And hey, I'm going to have 100% success rate if I live by this book and I build my relationships based on these foundations, that it's going to it's going to do me and those around me really, really well. So
Ah, I
I'm
love
a
it.
big fan of that book.
I love it. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you, get information about what you do, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm becoming a bit more active on Instagram, posting more videos and reels, and going to be a bit more mindful this year to post more educational reels and content specifically relating to networking strategies, and just how to show up excellently in your networking efforts. And then LinkedIn is also a great place to find me. You can find my pages at the Caleb Paull or the VIP Co. So it's the word the VIP spelled out, and then Co. That's my company page as well on both Instagram and LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you all on LinkedIn. I'm posting actively there, and always love to expand my network and nurture new relationships through those platforms. So please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Goodness, I love you. Well, I love it. Thank you so much. Listeners, today, take that next step and text someone that maybe you've been waiting for, and use this incredible advice that Caleb's just given out. And so appreciate this. Thank you so much. You just share so easily, and you just gave us so much wisdom. Really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jason. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you. our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.